I was 11 years old the first time I realized my father didn't actually dislike successful women. He only disliked them when they were related to him. That understanding didn't arrive all at once. It grew quietly over the years, hidden inside little moments that seemed harmless by themselves but formed a very different picture when placed together. Looking back now, I can trace almost every major decision in my life to one sentence my father repeated so often that it eventually became part of the background noise in our house. Some people are born to lead, and some people should learn to follow. Whenever he said it, he was never looking at my older brother. He was always looking at me. My name is Lauren Mitchell. I'm 33 years old. I own a cybersecurity consulting company with clients across North America, and last month my father unknowingly stood on a stage in front of nearly 400 executives and praised my company as one of the most innovative firms in the industry. He had absolutely no idea it belonged to me. By the time he found out, it was already too late to pretend he had always believed in me. But before I tell you how that happened, you need to understand where everything started. Growing up in Raleigh, North Carolina, my family looked perfectly normal from the outside. Dad, Michael, worked as a regional sales director for a manufacturing company. Mom, Elaine, taught high school English for almost 20 years before retiring early. My older brother Daniel was the athlete everyone admired. He played baseball, collected trophies, and somehow managed to receive praise for achievements that would have been considered ordinary if anyone else had accomplished them. I was different. I liked computers. Not video games, not social media, computers themselves. While other kids spent weekends at the mall, I spent mine taking apart old desktop towers that neighbors were throwing away just to figure out how everything inside worked. I wasn't trying to become rich or impress anyone. I simply loved solving problems that looked impossible until you found the missing piece. Mom understood that. Dad never did. Whenever relatives visited, he introduced Daniel with genuine excitement. This one's going to do big things. Then he would gesture toward me almost as an afterthought. And Lauren, well, she's always reading something. Everyone laughed, including me. Children have an incredible ability to laugh at jokes that quietly damage their confidence because they assume adults know better. By high school, my grades were almost perfect. I won statewide programming competitions, earned academic scholarships, and spent evenings building simple software tools for local businesses that paid surprisingly well for a teenager. Dad barely noticed. When Daniel hit 3 home runs in one weekend tournament, we celebrated with dinner at the nicest steakhouse in town. When I won first place at a statewide technology competition against students nearly 3 years older than me, Dad looked at the trophy for less than 5 seconds before asking whether colleges even cared about computer contests. That became his favorite phrase. Computer contests. As though everything I worked for was just another hobby. Mom tried balancing things. She attended every competition she possibly could and proudly displayed my certificates around the house until Dad quietly moved them into my bedroom because, according to him, guests didn't need to see every participation award. They weren't participation awards. Most of them were championships. I stopped correcting him. College finally gave me some distance. I earned a full scholarship to Carnegie Mellon University, one of the strongest technology schools in the country. The acceptance letter arrived on a rainy Thursday afternoon, and I still remember running into the kitchen expecting the kind of excitement I'd watched Daniel receive dozens of times. Mom cried. Dad looked at the brochure for maybe 10 seconds. That's pretty far away. It is. Couldn't you have picked somewhere closer? They offered a full scholarship. So we'll save almost $300,000. He shrugged. I guess. That was the entire conversation. 3 months later, Daniel decided to attend a private university only 2 hours away. Dad bought him a brand new truck. He called it an investment in Daniel's future. I drove 12 hours to Pennsylvania in a 15-year-old Honda Civic that Mom secretly helped me buy after selling some jewelry Grandma had left her years earlier. She never told Dad. Neither did I. College changed everything. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the smartest person in every classroom, and I absolutely loved it. Every student around me seemed capable of solving problems that would have impressed my teachers back home, which meant every day forced me to improve instead of simply keeping up. During sophomore year, a professor introduced our class to ethical hacking and enterprise cybersecurity. Something clicked almost immediately. Most people saw hacking as breaking into systems. I saw it differently. It was puzzle solving under pressure. Companies paid enormous amounts of money to people capable of finding weaknesses before criminals did. While my classmates searched for internships at giant corporations, I started freelancing. Small businesses couldn't afford expensive cybersecurity firms, but they could afford someone like me. The first contract paid $800. The second paid nearly $2,000. Within 18 months, I had more work than I could complete alone. Dad wasn't impressed. Whenever he called, he asked the same question. So, have you found a real job yet? I already have clients. I mean a real company. I own one. He laughed. No, you have a side hustle. The words shouldn't have bothered me anymore. Somehow they still did. After graduation, I turned down offers from 3 Fortune 500 companies. Instead, I rented a tiny office above an old bookstore in Pittsburgh with peeling paint, unreliable heating, and exactly one window that refused to close completely during winter. The office looked terrible. I loved every inch of it. I invested almost everything I had saved into equipment, licensing, insurance, and hiring one junior analyst who had graduated a semester behind me. His name was Victor. On our first day, we had 2 folding desks, 3 laptops, terrible coffee, and enough optimism to make up for everything else we lacked. The first year nearly broke us. Some months we barely earned enough to cover payroll. I stopped paying myself altogether for almost 4 months because I refused to miss an employee paycheck. Victor never knew. Neither did anyone else. Then something unexpected happened. One satisfied client referred another. That client referred 3 more. Within another year, regional banks, healthcare providers, and manufacturing companies started contacting us directly instead of the other way around. By our 4th anniversary, we had 22 employees, clients in 7 states, and annual revenue that exceeded anything I had imagined when I first unlocked the door to that tiny office above the bookstore. Dad still introduced me as my daughter who works with computers. Not the founder, not the CEO, not the business owner, just my daughter who works with computers. Eventually, I stopped trying to change his mind. Success has a strange way of teaching patience. You realize some people will never see you clearly because acknowledging your accomplishments would force them to question years of assumptions. So I built my company. I expanded my team. I focused on clients instead of approval. Then, almost 9 years after opening that tiny office, I received an invitation that changed everything. The National Manufacturing Innovation Summit wanted me to deliver the keynote presentation on cybersecurity risks affecting American manufacturers. The funny part wasn't the invitation. The funny part was the list of other featured speakers. About halfway down the page, I saw my father's name. I'm not usually nervous before giving presentations. After nearly a decade of speaking at industry events, webinars, and executive board meetings, I had learned that confidence rarely comes from talent alone. It comes from preparation, repetition, and knowing your material well enough that even unexpected questions become opportunities instead of obstacles. This conference was different, not because of the audience, not because it was the largest event of my career, because my father was going to be there. For nearly a week, I debated whether I should tell him I had been invited. Part of me wanted to avoid the awkwardness altogether. Another part wondered whether this might finally be the moment he looked at me differently. In the end, I said nothing. Not because I was hiding, because I wanted him to experience the conference exactly the same way every other attendee would. Without expectations. Without family connections. Just another executive listening to another speaker. The conference took place in Chicago inside one of the largest convention centers I'd ever seen. More than 2,000 professionals from manufacturing, technology, logistics, and cybersecurity filled the building over 3 days, attending workshops, networking sessions, and keynote presentations from industry leaders. Our company had also rented a booth in the exhibition hall. Not a huge one, just large enough for several demonstration stations, a meeting area, and a video wall showing examples of real cyber attacks we had helped prevent for clients. Watching my employees set everything up made me smile. Most of them had joined when we were still struggling. Now, they were discussing contracts worth millions of dollars as though that had always been normal. Success sneaks up on you like that. You rarely notice it while you're living through it. The first morning began with registration and breakfast. I was pouring myself coffee when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Lauren? I turned around. Dad. He looked almost exactly the same as he had the last time we met for Thanksgiving. Expensive navy suit. Conference badge hanging around his neck. Phone already in his hand checking emails before 8 in the morning. For a second, we simply looked at each other. I didn't know you were coming. I was invited. Really? He sounded genuinely surprised. What company are you with? I own one. He smiled politely. That's nice. Before I could answer, another attendee interrupted him to discuss a supply chain panel, and within seconds he had shifted his attention completely away from me. No questions. No curiosity. No interest in why I had been invited. Just another conversation. I wasn't even disappointed. I had experienced that reaction too many times to expect anything different. About an hour later, I was walking through the exhibition hall when I noticed Dad standing in front of our booth. He didn't recognize it. Why would he? Our company operated under the name Sentinel Ridge Cybersecurity, not Lauren Mitchell Consulting. Victor was explaining one of our security assessment platforms while several manufacturing executives listened carefully. Dad seemed genuinely impressed. I stayed far enough away that neither of them noticed me. As the demonstration ended, I heard Dad say something that made me stop walking. This is one of the most impressive cybersecurity companies I've seen here. Victor thanked him. Dad continued. Whoever built this business clearly understands manufacturing. I couldn't help smiling. For the first time in my life, he was complimenting something I had created. He simply didn't know it. Later that afternoon, I attended one of his presentations. Dad had always been a strong public speaker. Confident, funny, comfortable in front of large audiences. His session about modern manufacturing partnerships received several standing ovations. I applauded with everyone else. Despite everything between us, I was still proud of him. Sometimes relationships are complicated enough that admiration and disappointment can exist at exactly the same time. The following morning was my keynote. Nearly 400 executives filled the ballroom long before the session started. Backstage, the conference organizer clipped a microphone onto my jacket while reviewing the introduction. You've got a full room. I noticed. Nervous? A little. Good. He laughed. It means you'll be great. When my name was announced, I walked onto the stage beneath bright lights that made it almost impossible to see individual faces. Almost. Because one face stood out immediately. Dad. Third row. Coffee cup in one hand. Conference notebook in the other. His expression changed the instant he recognized me. At first, he looked confused, then surprised, then completely frozen. I smiled politely before beginning. For the next 45 minutes, I spoke about ransomware, supply chain vulnerabilities, insider threats, and the rapidly changing cybersecurity landscape affecting American manufacturers. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was simply explaining the work my team had spent years perfecting. When the presentation ended, the audience stood. The applause lasted much longer than I expected. Afterward, dozens of executives lined up to ask questions, exchange business cards, and discuss future partnerships. Dad remained seated, watching, waiting. Almost an hour later, after the crowd finally disappeared, he approached me. He stopped speaking. I didn't know. I know. You never told me. You never asked. Neither of us said anything for several seconds. Finally, he looked toward the exhibition hall. That company, Sentinel Ridge, it's yours? It always has been. He slowly nodded. I visited your booth yesterday. I saw. I told your employee it was one of the best companies here. I heard. For the first time in my entire life, my father looked embarrassed. Not because I had corrected him, because he had spent years dismissing something he had just praised without realizing who created it. He took a slow breath. I'm proud of you. Those 4 words should have meant everything. Instead, they felt strangely late. I appreciate that. You don't believe me. I believe you're sincere. But I'm 33. I looked around the now empty ballroom. You missed every version of this before today. He lowered his eyes. I know. No. I shook my head gently. I don't think you do. I built this company 9 years ago. I hired my first employee with money I'd saved from freelance work. I nearly lost everything twice. I slept in my office. I skipped paychecks so my employees wouldn't have to. You never asked how things were going. You only asked when I'd get a real job. He didn't interrupt. Because he couldn't. Everything I said was true. I wasn't looking for approval. I stopped needing that a long time ago. I just wanted curiosity. One question. One visit. One afternoon where you cared enough to understand what I was building. His eyes became noticeably red. I'm sorry. I know. And I mean it. I know. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Finally, he asked quietly, Can we start over? I smiled. Not because everything had suddenly been repaired. Some things don't work like that. I'd rather start honestly. What does that mean? It means we don't pretend the last 20 years didn't happen. It means if we're going to have a relationship, Link has to be based on who I actually am. Not the daughter who works with computers. Not the child you expected less from. The woman who built something valuable without waiting for permission to believe in herself. He nodded slowly. I'd like to know her. I hope you do. Whether our relationship will ever become what it could have been, I honestly don't know. Some opportunities disappear forever. Others simply require more patience than either person expected. What I do know is this. My greatest achievement was never standing on that stage. It wasn't building a successful company. It wasn't receiving a standing ovation from hundreds of executives. It was reaching a point where my father's opinion no longer determined my confidence. For years, I believed success would finally convince him to see me differently. Instead, success taught me something much more important. The people who matter most in your life should recognize your value long before the rest of the world applauds it. And if they don't, keep building anyway.